Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, where I talk about weapons from movies and video games and compare what we see on our screens with samples from real life. In this video, we will talk about stiletto knives. We will try to figure out how they appeared, find out the history of these cool looking knives, and we will also try out why these knives were banned in many countries at one moment. If you are interested, be sure to like and watch the video until the end. Surely you didn't know that stilettos were the founders of the creation of switchblades. The first folding stilettos were originally very large in size. Their dimensions were so large that it wasn't really clear whether this was some kind of large knife or it actually was a small sword. Unlike modern models that can be bought at any knife store, their predecessors didn't yet have a safety lock that would protect the blade from accidental, spontaneous unfolding, to which we of course have long been accustomed. Italian stilettos are one of the few modern knives that trace their history back to the Middle Ages. In general, the word stiletto itself is an abbreviation for the original stylus, which translates as a stick for writing or a sharp rod. Initially, it was an Italian dagger with a straight cross-like guard, but at the same time, a narrow and thin blade. The blade could be sharpened, but in some cases, it didn't have a cutting edge. By its section, the blade could not only be flat like a traditional dagger, but also round, oval, 3- or 4-sided. Stiletto is a direct descendant of the so-called dagger of mercy used by knights on the battlefield as early as the 12th century. It was intended for making a penetrating blow to the weak points of the knight's armor and hitting the knight's body, who at that moment was not moving on a horse. The length of such a dagger was about 30 centimeters. In the 16th century, it began to be used in duels as a weapon to intercept the opponent's blade and as a tool of self-defense. For the same reason, a more developed guard appeared on the daggers, and then around the turn of the 17th century, a genoese knife appeared in Genoa, which became widespread among all segments of the population. It marked the transition of stiletto from a military weapon to the status of an utility knife. The handle of the genoese knife usually didn't have a guard and was slightly asymmetrical in shape compared to the blade. It could be made from olive wood, sage, laurel, and the most expensive copies were made from ivory. There was even a variety with an oar-shaped blade hidden in the main blade for stabbing. The main blade of such a knife was screwed to the handle and could be removed at any time, turning a completely peaceful knife into a melee weapon. So for example, during the First and Second World Wars, interest in stilettos arose as combat knives for airborne sabotage units, as well as for other branches of the armed forces that needed weapons to silently eliminate an enemy. In the late 1940s, famous British hand-to-hand combat instructors designed the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife in honor of the name of the creators of this weapon. It was a double-edged dagger with a long, narrow blade, designed for optimal penetration when delivering a thrusting blow. However, the design of this type of combat knife made it possible to deliver cutting blows if the blade was well sharpened. But did you know that over time the legendary stilettos were banned from circulation and manufacture in the United States? In the 1950s, a large number of folding automatic knives with a blade block were imported from Italy to the United States. The main part of these knives had a design in which the blade was unfolding from the side. The rest used a throwout mechanism. People named these Italian switchblades as stilettos because most of them had a tapering needle-like point, a long and thin blade, simplified, limited protrusions, and a narrow handle. The result was a huge increase in the popularity of Italian automatic stilettos among young people, members of teenage gangs, weapon collectors, and just fans of edged weapons. All this happened against the backdrop of an increase in criminal activity among teenagers, which were uniting in gangs. It should be noted here that in the United States, there were companies producing automatic switchblades. Moreover, automatic knives have been known in the US since about the 1850s. Thus, switchblades per se were not something new to Americans, but nevertheless, the difference was that most switchblades made in the USA were well adapted specifically for domestic purposes. In this regard, the swift and predatory features of the Italian stilettos were strikingly different from them. The blades of which had a bayonet or dagger type and were good only for inflicting deep, penetrating wounds. In domestic terms, Italian stilettos were practically useless. By the way, among other things, it was precisely this feature of the Italian automatic stilettos that the Tennessee state senator pointed out when he proposed that Congress should consider to ban such knives. Then, during the 1950s, the mainstream US newspapers and tabloids worked together to inflate and prop up the image of a juvenile delinquent with a switchblade in his pocket. The press focused on the switchblade as a symbol of crime, while ominous stories about urban youth gang wars, consisting of representatives of disadvantaged classes and racial minorities, agitated public attention. Repeated reports of stabbings, robberies, and other criminal acts made by youth offenders naturally involving automatic knives led to strong calls from the media and public figures for a law that would ban the sale and distribution of automatic knives. As if the cause of the problems were exactly in automatic knives, although I think you perfectly understand that it is easy to rob or inflict serious injuries using even a kitchen knife. So the ban on automatic knives didn't have any common sense. Well, now let's look at the pros and cons of a modern folding stiletto in combat and whether it should be used for self-defense at all. On the plus side, you can see the very small size of modern models, as well as the fact that you simply don't need to carry a sheath. Just press the button and the knife is ready to use. Also, due to its shape, such a knife can easily inflict penetrating wounds on a target. After all, the thinner the point, the easier it enters a body. However, there are also a lot of downsides. Firstly, the same mechanism for extending the knife during a usual throwing out of a blade. It seems convenient at first, but in real battlefield conditions, no one will rely on a pair of springs and screws. After all, there is a high chance of a failure of such a mechanism before the start of the battle due to, for example, weather conditions, rusting, and similar things. I don't even talk about the fact that such a mechanism can easily break down when delivering blows that won't hit a body, for example, body armor or bone. Secondly, a combat knife should be able to carry out a lot of functions at once and be useful both in and out of combat. For example, with a good combat knife, one can cook food, scour boards, or kill a wild boar. But the stiletto, besides its combat uses, might be useful maybe only as some kind of toothpick. Therefore, for a real fight, at the moment, no one uses stilettos. There are no armies in the world equipped with these knives. As for self-defense, in principle, the only thing you can do with such a knife is to deliver blows that eventually will kill a person. But because of such a small blade, you'll have to inflict an uncountable number of such blows. And I would like to see how then you will prove to a judge that these 50 stab wounds you've inflicted were self-defense and not a human attack. Therefore, for self-defense, I would definitely not advise you to use a stiletto. And in general, it is better to use a gas spray. After all, carrying a concealed knife is also prohibited in many countries. And now, let's find out in which games we came across this knife and how correctly its combat characteristics are displayed there. And of course, we will look at everyone's favorite game, CSGO, where stiletto is a skin for melee knives for both terrorists and counter-terrorists. And since a stiletto there is just a skin, then its combat characteristics in the game while using the skin shouldn't change, which means that in CS, it doesn't really matter whether your knife looks like a huge cleaver or a stiletto. We will still deal exactly the same amount of damage in any case. In reality, this is of course not the case. In addition, if we take the same CSGO, then any hit to the chest hitbox of another player model counts the same damage, while in reality the essence of stilettos was to strike exactly in the unprotected parts of the enemy's armor. In this case, if you actually tried to hit a person who is wearing a bulletproof vest with this toothpick, then naturally you would not inflict any damage on him. But in CS, for some reason, the damage is still applied. So although the stiletto in CS is a good skin to replace a standard knife appearance, however, in reality, not a single adequate fighter would use this weapon during a real armed conflict. Well, you can write in the comments where you have met different versions of stilettos, in what games you came across them, and what's something interesting you know about them. And of course, leave a like if you like this video.